now in the name of our loving, liberating, and life-giving God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
What a joy to be with you this day and to be with your rector and deacon and all the good folk of this congregation. Thank you, Jennifer and Bob. Oh, there's Bob. There's Bob. Thank you, and thank you to all of you for this invitation to share some time with you on this weekend when this diocese celebrates the ordination and consecration of your 11th bishop, I believe, Bishop Susan Haynes. And it was a wonderful day yesterday, and I have a feeling there were some members in this choir, choir. Yeah, I could tell. The choir yesterday was incredible, and then to hear you all, I said, oh, the choir is here today, too. Thank God. It really is. It's good to be with you, and pray God's blessing on you here at Hickory Neck Church and on the Diocese of Southern Virginia, and all that you will do for Jesus and this world in which we live. Now, forgive me for saying what I'm about to say, but I think it's accurate. While it wasn't perfect, the founding fathers and mothers had their flaws. They and the American Revolution, if I may quote the collect for Independence Day from the prayer book, they, and I quote from the prayer book, won liberty for themselves and for us, and lit the torch of freedom for nations yet unborn. They were human like the rest of us. It wasn't perfect, had its flaws, but they did light a torch of freedom and won liberty for generations yet unborn, and inspired freedom as God has decreed from the very foundations of the world. Remember what they said, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They lit a torch of freedom. The American Revolution was a sign of hope, the emergence of a city, a shining city sitting upon a hill. This morning, however, I want to suggest that we need another revolution. The first one was good. I'm not going anywhere. The first one was good. But we, and not just we here in this blessed country, but we in this world in which we live, we need another revolution. We need another torch of liberty and life to be lit again. We need a revolution of love. We need a Jesus revolution. We need that now. So for a text, let me offer these words from the gospel you just heard, because I think it's embedded in the story we just heard. Mary and Joseph bring Jesus to the temple in Jerusalem, as was customary, for both the rites of purification and presentation. Whenever a newborn baby was born, if it was a boy, it was circumcised on the 8th day, and then sometime around the 30th day, if they could, they would bring the child to a priest, in these days to a temple, where there would the rites of purification after childbirth, and the presentation or dedication of the child would happen. They would be dedicated to the Lord. There's a deep wisdom in that. I'm going to get to the text in a second, but there's a deep wisdom in that act of presenting or dedicating this child to the Lord, a reminder that we who are parents are not the possessors of our children. They have been given to us as a gift to care for, that they may take their place in the world. And so they came and brought the baby Jesus, presented him to old priest Simeon and the old prophetess Anna. And when Simeon saw the baby, he realized that this child, that this was the Messiah, that God was actually doing, there was something special about this baby. And that's when he said words that we have in our prayer book as part of the service of evening prayer. Lord, now, he looked and saw the baby and he said, Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace, which was a way of saying, I can go on and die now. I've seen the baby. Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace according to thy word, for mine eyes have seen thy salvation. Julia Ward Howe heard that phrase, mine eyes have seen thy salvation, and created a hymn, mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. And when Simeon said those words, he then looked at Mary and Joseph and said this, This child is destined for the rising and falling of many in Israel. And he will be a sign that will be opposed, for the inner thoughts of many will be revealed. The Roman Catholic version translation of that passage says, this child will be a sign of contradiction, who will expose the inner thoughts of human beings. This child is going to start a revolution. He's going to start a revolution. A friend of mine, Charles Marsh, who teaches at UVA, at University of Virginia, Charlottesville, in one of his books, says, he's a theologian, he says, and I quote, Jesus began the most revolutionary movement in all of human history. It was a movement of people for whom his teachings and his life became the center of their very lives. It was a movement of people for whom his way of love literally became their way of life. And they were changed, and in time they changed the world around them. We need another revolution, and Jesus has shown us the way. Why don't you just turn and tell your neighbor, we need another revolution, and Jesus has shown us the way. Just tell them, we need another revolution. Another revolution.
Yep.
And Jesus has shown us the way.
Jesus has shown us the way.
I was one of my favorite, what I do in my spare time or downtime when I'm trying to kind of decompress, to be honest, from whatever the pressures, whatever it is I've got to deal with, I usually watch silly movies. I don't want anything heavy. I don't need any Fellini films. I don't need to think. I mean, I want to not think. And one of my not thinking movies is the one Talladega Nights. That's right. If you want to relax your brain, that is one of those movies. You can really, it's wonderful. And you know, it's the story of Ricky Bobby, who's a race driver and all that. Okay, you all with me? Well, my favorite scene, there's several of them, but my favorite scene, I think you know which one I'm going to, is the dining room scene where they're in Ricky Bobby's house and his family is gathered around, his wife and his boys and his father-in-law and his best friend, and they're all at a lovely dining room table. I mean, this could be in Southern Living magazine. It is so elegant, and yet the one difference is there's a Kentucky Fried Chicken box right on the table. And they get ready to say grace over the food. You remember that scene? They get ready to say grace over the food, and Ricky Bobby, begins to explain. He said, I'm going to pray to the baby Jesus. He said, because I love me some baby Jesus. And he goes on. He has this whole exposition about baby Jesus. And he just goes on and on and on. And finally, his father-in-law says, well, look, the baby grew up. And Ricky Bobby said, I don't want anything to do with the grown-up Jesus. I want the baby Jesus. I had a parishioner, Mary Miller, God bless her, who's now gone on to glory. But Mary used to tell me when I was rector of St. James in Baltimore, and she used to say over and over again, she said, everybody loves baby Jesus. Everybody loves Christmas Jesus. But that baby really did grow up. And what that baby became, what he taught, the very example of his life, the Spirit of God that was in him, it caused a contradiction to the world, the way the world is often lived. And that contradiction got him killed. He didn't get killed because he was the baby Jesus. He got killed because, as Simeon said, this child will be a sign of contradiction. When some would shriek hate, this child will teach love. When some would shriek revenge, this child will cry, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. When some would live by self alone, he would say, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This child will be a sign of contradiction, who will expose the inner thoughts of the lesser angels of our nature and point us to the angels. We need another revolution. Y'all with me so far? I know that one of the things, I know that it's to talk about love, which is at the center of Jesus' teachings. I know that there's almost a quick reflex where you can turn it off. I mean, in the sense that, you know, you hear love and you go, oh. And that's true, and that's good. And you think of love, and in a few days, it's going to be Valentine's Day. I got a wife. I know the importance of Valentine's Day. In fact, I have an FTD reminder on my phone to make sure I don't miss Valentine's Day. So I know the importance of that, but love is actually bigger than even that. As wonderful as that kind of love is even bigger than that. And I know sometimes it's easy to dismiss love as not having anything to do with anything else except romance. And yet the truth is, love and this way of love was at the very center of the life and teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like unto it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two hang all the law and the prophets. This is God. This is the supreme law of God. This is the constitution of God. This is the ultimate will of God. This is the dream of God. Love the Lord your God. Love your neighbor as yourself. This is God's law. The ultimate law, the law of life. But even so, that word love gets mushy. Until you stop and think. A few years ago, it dawned on me, and it really did. It was a couple of years ago, it dawned on me. And I was doing a wedding. I mean, this is not the most recent wedding that anybody knows about, but it was another wedding, and a number of years ago, and the couple, of course, picked 1 Corinthians 13, and, you know, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not love, I am a noisy gong, a clanging cymbal. Now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. So, you know, the bride picked, 1 Corinthians 13, and I asked the groom, of course, is this good with you? And he said, oh, no. And anyway, so I was doing that as I was preparing just the wedding homily for them. It dawned on me, read 1 Corinthians 13 again. And I did. I said, wait a minute. And then I remembered I've been out of seminary a lot longer than Jennifer, which is why I like to go to young doctors now. Yeah, I figure their knowledge is, I know how young clergy are, or old clergy are. We knew it once, but got to go check in the book to make sure it's still the same. But I remember back in seminary even, when I took a course on the Corinthian correspondence of St. Paul, I remember we didn't discuss marriage that much except for that one chapter in 1 Corinthians where he does talk about marriage, but it's not chapter 13. And I remember that when he says, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, though I have all the religion in the world, though I know all the passages in the Bible, if I have not love, well, as Duke Ellington said, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. Right? And I realized that, and it dawned on me, wait a minute, Paul wasn't thinking about a wedding when he wrote it. It applies to a wedding, to be sure. Not to a wedding, but it applies to a marriage. It applies to human relationships. It applies to a society. It applies to a global community. When Paul wrote 1 Corinthians, he was writing to one of the most dysfunctional churches that has ever existed in human history. It was a church where they were fussing and fighting. I mean, I was Bishop of North Carolina for 15 years and had to settle many a congregational dispute when the saints were restless. Let us just say it that way. But none of our conflicts in the Diocese of North Carolina, none of the conflicts you'll ever see in the Diocese of Southern Virginia, none of them in the Episcopal Church, none of them in the Anglican Communion compare to the church at Corinth. This was the most dysfunctional church you could ever think of. If you look in the first chapter of 1 Corinthians, St. Paul says, it has been reported, this is a letter, remember he's sending a letter to them. It has been reported to me by Chloe's people that there are factions and dissension, and there is dissension among you. Now I want to stop back and ask, who is Chloe? Then I thought I've been ordained almost 40 years. I said, I've known a Chloe in every one of the churches where I pastor. Every church has a Chloe and may have several Chloes. They are the people that know everybody's business and believe, and they're evangelists because they want to share everybody's business. Right? That's Chloe. And then you got St. Paul. It has been reported to me by Chloe's people. And Chloe's people reported it, and they didn't have text. They didn't have tweet, they didn't have email, but they got that word out somehow. And so he says, it's been reported that you've divided yourselves into factions. Some say, I was baptized by Peter. I was baptized by Apollos. I was baptized by Paul. I was baptized by so-and-so. That makes me a better Christian than you. You're dividing yourselves into factions, groups, and individual collections of self-interest. And then as the letter goes on, you begin to see some of the divisions in the community. There's one of the parishioners is suing another parishioner in secular court. It goes on. I'm just telling what's in the Bible. Apparently, two of the parishioners who are not related, who each have spouses of their own, have a relationship between them that is not one that the church would bless. Are y'all with me on that? There's children in the room, so I wanted to cover that one up nicely. And that's going on. There's somebody stealing from somebody else in the church. Then at communion time, this is actually in the Bible. I'm not making this up. At communion time, the rich folk take their communion first, then the poor folk get to take their communion. Then there are folk who say, I'm a better Christian than you are, which means I'm going to heaven and you're not. And Paul wants to pull his hair out. It's in the midst of this community being torn asunder by unenlightened self-interest that Paul says the solution to all of this, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, have not love. Well, as Shakespeare said, it is a sound, a loud sound, a noise, tale told by an idiot, signifying nothing. And then if you read 1 Corinthians 13, and you read in the middle of it, Paul says love is not jealous. Love is not rude. Love does not insist on its own way. Love rejoices in the right. It rejoices in the good. This love can heal broken communities. This love can bring us together. This love can lift us up. This love can set us free. This love is the revolution that we need. We need another revolution. But if you don't believe Paul, maybe you believe Jesus. I'm going up the chain of hierarchy. and I noticed something else, Jennifer, about Jesus. He speaks most frequently about love, either in reference to his crucifixion or when he's about to give up and sacrifice his life on the cross. There are a few other instances in the Sermon on the Mount where he talks about love, but most of the times that Jesus talks about love, it's in Holy Week. It's at Holy Week that he had the conversation with the lawyer and said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. That was Holy Week as he was getting ready to sacrifice his life. It was at the Last Supper that Jesus says, a new commandment I give you. He washes the feet of the disciples, and then he says, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you. It's at the Last Supper that he says, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now abide in my love. Literally, as Judas is slithering out of the room, as Peter will soon deny that he knows him, as most of them will abandon him, as he will be sacrificed on the altar of reality itself by the power of the Roman Empire, he says, greater love has no one than this, that he give up his life for his friends. And I have called you friends. It was thinking about the cross that in John 3:16, he said, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. He didn't take, he gave. Love gives. Love makes space. Love seeks the good and the welfare and the well-being even of the other. Love is the way. This is not a pipe dream. This is not a naive expectation. This is the hope of humanity. And in a funny way, we teach the unselfish way, which is the way of love. Are y'all with me on that? That's what this love is. It's the unselfish way. God so loved the world that he gave. He didn't take, he gave. We teach it to children. And then we forget it the older we grow. Actually, Plato said that. Everything you needed to learn, you already know. And then there's something about living in reality that you kind of forget it. But we teach this way of unselfish love to children. And I'll close with it, and you'll know what I mean. Some years ago, and some of you may remember, a guy named Robert Fulghum published a book titled, y'all remember now? All I Really Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And though he didn't use the word love, when you see love as the unselfish, sacrificial way, that's exactly what he was talking about. And I remember being in kindergarten learning this. And so he listed the things that he learned in kindergarten. Share everything. Oh my goodness, what would the world be like? You all have done that here. I saw pictures of what this space looked like. Jennifer showed them to me before the service of what this space looked like because you provided shelter for homeless people and homeless families. Share everything. That's what love looks like. You all did it. Thank you, Hickory Neck Church. Thank you. But not only that, he says, play fair. Wouldn't this be fascinating for our legislators? Number 3, he says, don't hit people. Yeah, okay, really does make sense. This is love made real and clear. Yeah? Number 4, put things back where you found them. Right? We teach it to children. Why do we forget it the older we get? But anyway, that's how we are. I know I'm like that. Number 5, clean up your own mess. Number 6, don't take things that aren't yours. These are almost better than the 10 Commandments. If Moses had Number 7, say you're sorry when you hurt somebody. Help me somebody, right? Number 8, wash your hands before you eat. Number 9, flush. Number 10, take a nap every afternoon. And number 11, when you go out into the world, isn't this wonderful? When you go out into the world, watch out for traffic. Hold hands and stick together. My brothers and sisters, that is the revolution we need. We need it in our state legislatures. We need it in the Lord have mercy. We need it in the Congress of the United States. We need it in the government of this blessed land. We need it in the nations of the world. We need it in our hearts and in our lives. Imagine what this world would be like if we would dare to live by the law of love every day of our lives. It would be a different world. You wouldn't have to provide shelter for homeless people because we would make sure everybody had a home. We wouldn't have to worry about children going to bed hungry because we'd make sure that every child gets the food that they need. We would make sure every child gets the education that they need. We would make sure that every man, woman, and child, no matter who they are, sits under their own vine and fig tree, lay down those swords and shields down by the riverside and study war no more. We would make sure that there's plenty good room for us all. So as the old slaves used to say, borrowing from that last commandment, when you go out into the world, watch out for the traffic. Hold hands, America, and then stick together. They used to say it this way, walk together, children, and don't you get weary, because there's a great camp meeting in the promised land. God love you. God bless you. And may God hold us all in those almighty hands of love. Amen.
Amen.